The thunder of hooves echoed across the dusty plains as Nora Fairchild's heart hammered in her chest, the rope around her wrists cutting deep as she stumbled forward. Death loomed before her in the form of an old oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching toward the darkening sky like skeletal fingers. A noose swayed in the hot Arizona breeze of 1876, waiting for her neck. She had been accused of a murder she didn't commit, and now these monsters masquerading as lawmen were going to hang her without trial. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking as tears carved clean trails down her dirt-streaked face. "Please end it quick." The leader of the vigilante group smirked, yanking her roughly toward the makeshift gallows when the unmistakable sound of a Winchester rifle being cocked cut through the evening air. "I believe the lady deserves a fair trial," came a deep, steady voice from atop a dappled gray stallion. The setting sun silhouetted his broad shoulders and the wide brim of his hat. "This ain't your business, stranger," the leader spat, his hand moving toward his holster. The rifle didn't waver. "I'm making it my business." What happened next unfolded in mere seconds. The leader drew, but the stranger was faster. A single shot knocked the gun from the man's hand. The other vigilantes froze, suddenly aware they were outmatched by the man's skill alone. "Cut her loose," the stranger commanded, dismounting in one fluid motion. His spurs jingled as his boots hit the ground. When no one moved, he leveled the Winchester at the leader's chest. Now, with reluctant hands, they sliced through the ropes binding Nora. Her legs gave way and she collapsed to the ground, prepared to feel the cold kiss of a bullet ending her suffering. "Please end it quick," she whispered, eyes squeezed shut, certain this stranger merely wanted the privilege of killing her himself. The stranger knelt beside her, his shadow falling across her trembling form. She felt the gentle pressure of his hand on her shoulder. "No, madam," he said softly, his voice like warm honey over gravel. "We start living now." Nora opened her eyes to find herself looking into the kindest blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath a mop of sandy hair. His expression was solemn but gentle. "The name's Finn Xavier," he said, helping her to her feet. "And I believe you've got a story to tell." The vigilantes didn't linger. With their leader nursing a wounded hand and pride, they mounted their horses and scattered into the gathering dusk, muttering threats and promises of return. Nora swayed, light-headed from fear and days without proper food. Finn steadied her with a strong arm. "I don't understand," she murmured. "Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" His lips quirked into something not quite a smile. "I've found that most folks deserving of a hanging don't typically plead for a quick end. They bargain and bluster." He studied her face. "You strike me as someone who's had the misfortune of being in the wrong place at the wrong time." She nodded weakly. "They found me with the body. I was trying to help him, but he was already gone." "Can you ride?" Finn asked, glancing over his shoulder at the road that stretched out behind them. "Those men will be back, likely with more of their kind. We should put some distance between us and this tree." Nora hesitated. Trusting a stranger seemed foolish after all she'd endured, but staying meant certain death. "I can ride," she affirmed. Finn lifted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. One arm circled her waist securely as he took the reins with his free hand. "Where are we going?" she asked as the horse began moving, the rhythm of its gait both soothing and unfamiliar. "Somewhere safe," Finn replied, his breath warm against her ear. "And then, Miss Fairchild, we're going to prove your innocence." She stiffened. "How do you know my name? News travels fast in these parts." Especially news about a schoolteacher accused of murdering the town's most prosperous cattle baron. Nora felt tears threaten again. "I didn't kill Jacob Millerson." "I believe you," Finn said simply, and those 3 words kindled something within her that she thought had died days ago. Hope. They rode through the twilight, the desert landscape transforming around them as night descended. Stars appeared one by one, until the sky was a blanket of glittering light. Despite her exhaustion, Nora remained alert, aware of every shift in Finn's posture behind her, every sound that might indicate pursuit. "We'll stop here for the night," Finn announced as they approached a small cabin nestled in a grove of cottonwoods. "It belongs to an old friend who won't mind us using it." The cabin was simple, but clean, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed in the corner. Finn busied himself lighting a fire while Nora stood awkwardly in the doorway. "You should rest," he said, not looking up from his task. "Take the bed, I'll keep watch." "Mr. Xavier, Finn," he corrected. "Finn," she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "I can't thank you enough for what you did, but I can't involve you further." "Those men will kill you too if they find us together." He straightened, dusting his hands on his trousers. "With all due respect, Miss Fairchild, you're already involved me. Besides, I'm harder to kill than I look." A ghost of a smile played across his lips. "Nora," she offered in return. "And I doubt that. You look formidable." Something flashed in his eyes, amusement, perhaps, or appreciation. "Get some rest, Nora. Tomorrow we start figuring out who really killed Jacob Millerson and why they're so eager to see you hang for it." Despite her protests, exhaustion claimed her quickly. She fell into a deep sleep, haunted by dreams of nooses and faceless accusers, only to wake with a start hours later. The cabin was dark except for the dying embers in the fireplace. Finn sat in a chair near the door, his rifle across his lap, watching the night through the window. "Bad dreams?" he asked without turning. Nora sat up, pulling the rough blanket around her shoulders. "How did you know?" "You called out in your sleep." Now he did look at her, his expression hidden in shadow. "Want to talk about it?" She hesitated, then found herself telling him everything: how she'd come to Red Rock Falls 6 months ago to teach at the newly established school, how Jacob Millerson had been kind to her, offering her a place to stay on his ranch until the schoolhouse was completed. How she'd found him one evening in his study, a knife protruding from his chest, and how his foreman had discovered her there, covered in blood, trying desperately to revive a man who was beyond help. "They didn't even give me a trial," she finished, her voice barely audible. "Just declared me guilty and decided to hang me, if you hadn't come along when you did." Finn was silent for a long moment. Did Millerson have enemies? "Everyone liked him," Nora replied, then paused. "At least I thought they did." He had been arguing with someone the day before I overheard raised voices from his study, but I couldn't make out what they were saying or who he was arguing with. "And the foreman, what's his name?" "Silas Gray. He's run the ranch for years, according to the townsfolk." Finn nodded thoughtfully. "Does he stand to gain anything from Millerson's death?" Nora frowned. "I don't know. Jacob never discussed his business with me." "We need to find out who inherits the ranch," Finn said decisively, "and we need to do it without getting you killed in the process." "How?" Nora asked, desperation edging into her voice. "I can't go back to town. They'll hang me on sight." Finn rose and added a log to the fire, coaxing the embers back to life. In the renewed glow, his profile was strong and determined. "I'll go," he said. "I have a few friends in these parts who owe me favors. One happens to be the county clerk. If anyone knows the contents of Millerson's will, it'll be him." "And me?" Nora asked. "You'll stay here where it's safe. I'll leave you my pistol." She shook her head. "I've never fired a gun in my life." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Then I'll teach you before I go, but that's for tomorrow. For now, try to get some more rest." "I don't think I can sleep again," she confessed. Finn considered her for a moment, then reached for something in his saddlebag. "My mother used to read to me when I couldn't sleep," he said, producing a dog-eared copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. "Would you like me to read to you?" The unexpected gentleness of the offer brought tears to her eyes. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Finn pulled his chair closer to the bed and began to read, his deep voice weaving the tale of betrayal and redemption. Nora found herself lulled by the rhythm of his words, the tension gradually leaving her body. The last thing she remembered before drifting off was the warmth of his hand as he carefully tucked the blanket around her shoulders. Morning brought clarity and the pungent aroma of coffee. Nora awoke to find Finn at the small stove, frying bacon in a cast iron pan. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Hope you're hungry." Nora realized she was famished. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Starving, actually. They shared a simple but hearty breakfast, and for a few peaceful moments, Nora could almost forget the dire circumstances that had brought them together. But reality intruded all too soon. "I need to teach you to shoot before I leave," Finn said, setting aside his empty plate. "And we should talk about what happens next." Outside, Finn set up empty cans on a fallen log and demonstrated how to load, aim, and fire his Colt revolver. The weapon felt alien and dangerous in Nora's hands, but she was determined to learn. "Steady your breathing," Finn instructed, standing close behind her, his hands guiding hers into position. "Squeeze the trigger, don't pull it." The first shot went wild, the recoil stronger than she'd anticipated. But Finn was patient, correcting her stance, offering quiet encouragement. By the 10th shot, she managed to hit one of the cans, sending it flying off the log. "Not bad," Finn acknowledged with a nod of approval. "Keep practicing while I'm gone, and remember, only use it if I have no choice," Nora finished for him. "I understand." Finn's expression grew serious. "I should be back by nightfall. If I'm not, don't come looking for me. Head north through the pass, and you'll reach a ranch belonging to a man named Howard Tanner. Tell him Finn Xavier sent you, and he'll help you get to safety." "You're talking like you might not come back," Nora said, a knot forming in her stomach. "Just being cautious," he replied, but something in his eyes told her he was more concerned than he was letting on. "Ridge Rock Falls isn't exactly friendly territory for me either." "Why?" she asked. "You mentioned friends there, but you seem worried about going back." Finn hesitated, then sighed. "Let's just say I have history there. History that might complicate things." Before she could press for details, he was checking his weapons and saddling his horse. Nora watched him prepare with growing anxiety. "Be careful," she said as he mounted up, the morning sun casting long shadows across the clearing. Finn touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "Lock the door behind me, and don't open it for anyone but me. I'll whistle Greensleeves so you know it's me." With that, he rode off, leaving Nora alone with her thoughts, a loaded revolver, and the oppressive weight of uncertainty. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Nora practiced shooting until her arm ached, then occupied herself by cleaning the cabin and exploring its meager contents. She found a small collection of books, some preserved food, and a hunting knife that she tucked into her belt for additional protection. As sunset approached, she grew increasingly anxious. Finn should have been back by now. She found herself pacing, pausing at every sound, straining to hear the promised whistle. When darkness fell, and there was still no sign of him, panic began to set in. What if he'd been caught? What if the vigilantes had found him asking questions about her? The thought of Finn suffering because of her was unbearable. A distant noise caught her attention, hoofbeats approaching rapidly. Nora extinguished the lamp and positioned herself near the window, Finn's revolver clutched in her trembling hands. The rider came into view, but in the darkness, she couldn't tell if it was Finn or someone else. Then she heard the soft, melodic whistle of Greensleeves floating through the night air. Relief flooded her as she rushed to unbolt the door. Finn nearly fell into the cabin, one hand pressed to his side, dark stains spreading across his shirt. "You're hurt," Nora gasped, helping him to a chair. "Just a graze," he managed, though his pallor and the amount of blood suggested otherwise. "Got what we needed, though." Nora moved quickly, finding clean cloths and a bottle of whiskey. "What happened?" Finn winced as she helped him remove his shirt, revealing a deep gash across his ribs. "Sela's Gray happened. He didn't take kindly to my questions." Nora dampened a cloth with whiskey and began cleaning the wound. Finn hissed, but didn't pull away. "Gray inherits everything," Finn continued through gritted teeth. "Seems Millerson changed his will just weeks before his death. The previous beneficiary was his niece in San Francisco." "That can't be a coincidence," Nora murmured, working carefully to bandage the wound. It gets worse, Finn added. According to my friend at the clerk's office, Millerson was planning to sell the ranch. He'd already signed preliminary papers with a buyer from back east. The sale would have left Gray without a job or a home. So Gray killed Jacob to inherit the ranch before it could be sold, Nora concluded, securing the bandage. But why frame me? Why not just make it look like an accident or a robbery gone wrong? Finn grimaced as he shifted in the chair. My guess, opportunity. You were there, alone with the body, an outsider with no family or connections to defend you, the perfect scapegoat. Nora sat back on her heels, the implications settling heavily upon her. So we know the truth, but how does that help me? It's still my word against his, and he's a respected local while I'm just a woman who deserves justice. Finn interrupted firmly. And we're going to get it for you. How? We have no proof. A glint appeared in Finn's eyes. Actually, we might. When I was leaving town, I overheard something interesting. Millerson kept a journal. Gray's been tearing the place apart looking for it, which means it might contain evidence against him, Nora finished, excitement building. Jacob was meticulous about his records. He wrote everything down. Exactly, and if Gray hasn't found it yet, it must be well hidden. Nora thought back to her time at the Millerson ranch. Jacob had a secret compartment in his desk. He showed it to me once when he was storing some important papers. Said it was the safest place in the house because only he knew about it. Then that's where we need to look, Finn said, attempting to stand but swaying dangerously. Nora pushed him gently back into the chair. You're not going anywhere tonight. You've lost too much blood. We don't have time to waste, Finn argued, though his voice lacked its usual strength. Gray is looking for that journal too. If he finds it first, he'll destroy it. If you collapse on the way there, we'll both end up dead, Nora countered firmly. We'll go tomorrow when you've had a chance to rest. Finn looked like he wanted to protest further, but exhaustion won out. He nodded reluctantly. First light then, but you should know the ranch will be guarded. Getting in won't be easy. I know a way, Nora said, surprising herself with her own determination. There's a servant's entrance that leads directly to the study. The cook, Mrs. Abernathy, showed it to me. She's off on Thursdays, which is tomorrow. Finn studied her with newfound respect. You're full of surprises, schoolteacher. So are you, Cowboy, she replied with a small smile. Now let me help you to the bed. You need proper rest. I'll take the floor, he insisted. You take the bed. Don't be ridiculous. You're injured. The bed is yours tonight. After a brief standoff, they compromised. The bed was narrow, but could fit them both if they lay close together. It was improper by any standard of decency, but survival had a way of rendering social conventions meaningless. Nora lay awake long after Finn's breathing had deepened into sleep, acutely aware of his warmth beside her, the solid presence of him. For the first time in days, despite the danger that lay ahead, she felt strangely safe. Dawn broke clear and bright, the desert awakening to another scorching day. Finn's condition had improved with rest. His color was better, and the wound showed no signs of infection. They ate a quick breakfast, then prepared for the journey to Millerson's ranch. If anything goes wrong, you run, Finn instructed as they mounted his horse. Don't wait for me, don't try to help. Just run and find Howard Tanner. I won't leave you behind, Nora said firmly. Nora, no, she cut him off. We do this together or not at all. You risked your life to save me. I won't abandon you. Finn looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him it would be futile. He nodded once, then urged the horse forward. The Millerson ranch lay several miles away, a sprawling property with a large main house and numerous outbuildings. They approached cautiously, using the rolling terrain for cover. There, Nora pointed to a small door partially concealed by overgrown shrubs. That's the servants' entrance. They left the horse tethered in a hidden gully and made their way on foot. The midday heat was oppressive, waves of it rising from the baked earth. Sweat trickled down Nora's spine as they crept toward the house, every sense alert for danger. The door was unlocked, just as Nora had hoped. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a narrow passageway that led past the kitchen and toward the main part of the house. "Which way to the study?" Finn whispered, his gun drawn. "This way," Nora led him through the quiet house, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give them away. The passage opens behind a bookcase. There's a latch disguised as a decorative element. The study looked exactly as she remembered it, walls lined with books, a massive desk dominating the center of the room, the window overlooking the distant mountains. This was where she had found Jacob, slumped over his desk, blood pooling around him. Nora pushed away the memory and moved to the desk. "The compartment is here," she whispered, running her fingers along the underside of the desktop until she found a small lever. There was a soft click, and a hidden drawer slid open. Inside lay a leather-bound journal. With trembling fingers, Nora extracted it and began flipping through the pages. Jacob's neat handwriting filled each one, documenting ranch business, personal reflections, and there, near the end, his concerns about Selah's Gray. "Listen to this," she whispered excitedly. "March 15, 1876. I confronted Selah's about the discrepancies in the cattle accounts. He denied any wrongdoing, but I know he's been selling stock and pocketing the money. I've decided to sell the ranch. I can no longer trust the man I once considered a friend." Finn leaned in, reading over her shoulder. "And here April 2. Selah's became threatening when I told him about the sale, said I would regret cutting him out after all his years of service. I fear what he might do." "This is it," Nora breathed. "This is what we need to prove." The sound of a gun being cocked froze them both. "I was wondering where that journal got to," came a cold voice from the doorway. Selah's Gray stood there, a revolver pointed at them, his thin lips curved in a humorless smile. "Been looking high and low for it." Finn shifted, placing himself partially between Nora and the gun. "It's over, Gray." "We know you killed Millerson." Gray shrugged, seemingly unconcerned. "And who's going to believe you? A drifter and a murderess? I reckon folks will be more interested in how I caught the fugitive schoolteacher and her accomplice breaking into the deceased's home." "Jacob trusted you," Nora said, anger overcoming her fear. "He gave you a home, a purpose. And he was going to take it all away," Gray snapped, his composure cracking. 30 years I gave to this ranch, 30 years. And he was going to sell it out from under me to some city slicker who'd probably turn it into a resort for rich Easterners." "So you killed him," Finn stated flatly, "and framed an innocent woman." Gray's smile returned, colder than before. "You have to admit, it worked perfectly." "Until you showed up, Xavier." He spat the name like a curse. "Should have known you'd stick your nose where it doesn't belong, just like your father." Nora felt Finn tense beside her. "You knew my father." "Knew him, I watched him die," Gray said with cruel satisfaction. "Right here in Red Rock Falls, 20 years ago. Shot in the back for being too noble for his own good, just like you're about to be. Everything happened at once." Finn lunged for Gray as the man's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot went wild, splintering the bookcase above Nora's head. She clutched the journal to her chest and dove behind the desk as the two men grappled for control of the weapon. Gray was stocky and strong, but Finn was quicker despite his injury. They crashed into furniture, each fighting for advantage. A second shot rang out, and Nora stifled a scream, uncertain who had been hit. Then there was silence. Nora peered cautiously around the edge of the desk to see Finn standing over Gray's motionless form, the revolver now in Finn's hand. Blood spread across Gray's shirt from a wound in his chest. "Are you hurt?" Nora asked, rushing to Finn's side. He shook his head, his face grim. "We need to go. That shot will bring others." But it was too late. The sound of multiple horses approaching reached them, followed by voices calling out Gray's name. "The window," Finn urged, holstering his gun and taking the journal from Nora. "Quick!" They scrambled through the window and ran for the cover of a nearby shed just as men burst into the study. Shouts of alarm echoed behind them as Gray's body was discovered. "There they are." Someone yelled, and bullets began kicking up dust at their heels. They reached their hidden horse and mounted hastily, Finn grimacing as the sudden movement pulled at his wound. He spurred the animal forward, and they galloped away from the ranch, pursued by half a dozen riders. "Where are we going?" Nora shouted over the thundering hooves. "To town," Finn called back. "To the sheriff, it's our only chance." "The sheriff? He's part of the lynch mob, not Sheriff Donovan. He was out of town when all this happened. He's back now, and he's a good man. He'll listen if we can reach him." Their pursuers were gaining ground, their fresher horses slowly closing the distance. A bullet whistled past Nora's ear, too close for comfort. "Hold tight," Finn warned, veering suddenly off the main trail and into a densely wooded area. The horse struggled through the underbrush, branches whipping at their faces as they pushed deeper into the thicket. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter as their gambit worked the other riders couldn't follow as easily through the dense woods. But their respite was temporary. Soon they would reach the other side and be exposed once more. "There," Finn pointed to a rocky outcropping. "We can make a stand there if we have to." They dismounted at the base of the rocks, and Finn slapped the horse's flank, sending it running out the other side of the woods, a diversion that might buy them precious minutes. Scrambling up the rocks, they found a defensible position with a clear view of the surrounding area. Finn checked his ammunition with a grim expression. 6 bullets, he reported. "Make each shot count if it comes to it." Nora clutched the journal, its pages containing the truth that could save her life if they lived long enough to share it. "I'm sorry I got you involved in this," she said quietly. Finn's expression softened as he looked at her. "I'm not." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "I'd do it all again." The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching riders. Finn raised his rifle, ready to defend their position, but then lowered it in surprise. "That's Sheriff Donovan," he said, relief evident in his voice. "And he's not with Gray's men." Indeed, the approaching group wore badges, and the man at their lead, tall, silver-haired, with a weathered face, looked nothing like the vigilantes who had tried to hang Nora. "Xavier," the sheriff called up. "You want to tell me why I've got half the county up in arms looking for you and the schoolteacher?" "Because we know who really killed Jacob Millerson," Finn replied, standing cautiously. "And we can prove it." The next hours passed in a blur. Sheriff Donovan escorted them to the town jail not as prisoners, but for their protection while he read through Millerson's journal. Gray's men arrived soon after, demanding Nora be turned over to them, but found themselves facing the sheriff's deputies instead. "This journal contains enough evidence to convict Silas Gray of theft, fraud, and premeditated murder," Donovan announced to the gathered crowd from the jailhouse steps. "Miss Fairchild is innocent of all charges, and anyone who says otherwise will answer to me." It wasn't that simple, of course. There was still resistance from some quarters, still those who believed Nora guilty, despite the evidence. But the tide had turned. When the county judge arrived the next day to review the case, he formally dismissed all charges against Nora and issued a statement acknowledging her innocence. Freedom, when it came, felt surreal. Nora stood on the boardwalk outside the judge's office, breathing in the dusty air of Red Rock Falls, no longer a fugitive. "What will you do now?" Finn asked, joining her. He'd been a constant presence throughout the proceedings, his testimony helping to clear her name. Nora considered the question. "I don't know. The school board might not want me back after all this." "You could leave," Finn suggested. "Start fresh somewhere else." She looked at him, studying the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. "Is that what you're going to do? Leave?" A shadow crossed his features. "I came back to Red Rock Falls for a reason. My father was killed here 20 years ago. His murder was never solved." He hesitated, then added, "What Gray said in the study about watching my father die, I need to know more." "So you're staying," Nora said, feeling both relief and uncertainty. Their shared ordeal had forged a connection between them, but what place did that have in the normalcy of everyday life? "For a while," Finn confirmed. He looked down at his boots, then back at her, something vulnerable in his gaze. "I'd like it if you stayed too." The sincerity in his voice made her heart skip. "Why?" "Because I've spent most of my life drifting from place to place, never putting down roots. But these past few days, despite all the danger or maybe because of it, I've felt something I haven't felt in a long time." He took a breath. "I felt like I found something worth staying for." Nora felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Xavier, are you saying you've developed feelings for me?" A smile broke across his face, transforming it. "I believe I am, Miss Fairchild, though I recognize the timing is less than ideal." Nora laughed, the sound surprising them both. "I've nearly been hanged, shot at, and chased across half the territory. I think conventional timing is the least of our concerns." Finn's smile widened. "Fair point." He offered her his arm. "May I buy you dinner? I know a place that serves a decent steak." Nora slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. "I'd like that very much." The restaurant was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and lanterns casting a warm glow over the diners. They talked long into the evening, sharing stories of their lives before fate had thrown them together. Finn spoke of his years as a scout for the army, then as a bounty hunter, and finally as a man searching for answers about his father's murder. Nora told him about growing up in Boston, losing her parents to influenza, and her decision to head west for a fresh start. "Seems we both came to Red Rock Falls looking for something," Finn observed as they walked back toward the hotel where the sheriff had arranged a room for Nora. "And found something else entirely," she added softly. They paused on the hotel's porch, the night air cool around them. Finn turned to face her, his expression serious. "Nora, I can't offer you much. My life has been complicated, dangerous at times. I'm beginning to think my life isn't exactly safe and predictable either," she replied with a wry smile. He chuckled at that. "True enough." His expression sobered. "What I'm trying to say, rather poorly, is that I'd like to court you properly if you'll allow it." Nora felt a warmth bloom in her chest. "I'd like that very much." The weeks that followed were a revelation. Nora was reinstated at the school after the town council issued a formal apology for her ordeal. Some parents were hesitant at first to send their children to her, but the children themselves were fascinated by her adventure and begged to be allowed to attend her classes. Finn, meanwhile, began investigating his father's murder with Sheriff Donovan's blessing. The case had gone cold years ago, but with Gray's dying accusation, there was renewed interest in solving it. They spent their evenings together, sometimes at the small house Nora had rented near the school, sometimes walking under the stars, sometimes attending the occasional social event in town. Slowly, the suspicion that had greeted Nora's return began to fade, replaced by acceptance and, from some quarters, admiration for her resilience. Finn's courtship was careful and considerate. He brought her wildflowers, carried her books, and listened to her dreams with genuine interest. They shared kisses that grew increasingly passionate, though Finn always pulled back before propriety was entirely forgotten. 3 months after the events at Millerson's ranch, Finn appeared at Nora's door looking troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, ushering him inside. "I found something," he said, pacing her small sitting room. "About my father's murder." Nora waited patiently as he gathered his thoughts. "There was a witness," he finally said. "A woman who saw everything but was too afraid to come forward at the time. Donovan tracked her down in Tucson." "What did she say?" Nora asked gently. She confirmed what Gray said. "My father was shot in the back, but she named the shooter a man named Victor Blackstone. He was a business partner of Gray's back then. They were running a cattle rustling operation and my father discovered it." "Where is Blackstone now?" Finn's jaw tightened. "Dead, died in a bar fight 5 years ago." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I came all this way for justice, and the man I was hunting is already in his grave." Nora crossed to him, placing a hand on his arm. "But now you know the truth. Your father was a good man who stood against corruption. That matters." Finn covered her hand with his own. You're right, it does matter. He looked down at her, his eyes softening. You matter, Nora, more than I ever expected. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. As do you, Finn Xavier. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, sending shivers up her arm. I've been thinking about the future, he said quietly. My future, our future, if you'll have me. Nora's heart quickened. What are you saying? Finn took a deep breath. I'm saying that I love you, Nora Fairchild. I love your courage, your kindness, your stubborn determination. I love the way you fight for what's right, the way you never gave up hope even when things seemed hopeless. Tears welled in Nora's eyes. Finn, he dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Will you marry me, Nora? Will you build a life with me here in Red Rock Falls, or wherever else our journey might take us? Joy bubbled up within her, bright and effervescent. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, I will marry you, Finn Xavier. He rose and pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise of their future together. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony attended by the townspeople who had come to respect and accept them. Sheriff Donovan stood as Finn's best man, and Mrs. Abernathy, the cook from Millerson's ranch who had always believed in Nora's innocence, served as her matron of honor. As they exchanged vows beneath the old oak tree, now adorned with wildflowers, rather than a noose, Nora reflected on the strange path that had led her to this moment. From the brink of death to the threshold of a new life, all because a stranger with kind eyes had refused to let injustice prevail. I love you, she whispered as Finn slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. And I love you, he replied, his voice steady and sure. Always. The wedding feast lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more goodwill than Nora had thought possible given the circumstances of her arrival in town. As the celebration continued around them, Finn led her away from the crowd to a quiet spot beneath the stars. Happy? He asked, his arms encircling her waist. More than I ever thought possible, she answered truthfully. Though I still have moments when I can hardly believe how much has changed. 6 months ago, I was a lonely schoolteacher in a new town. Then I was an accused murderess facing the gallows. And now? Now you're my wife, Finn finished, pride and wonder evident in his voice. Nora leaned into his embrace. It feels like a dream. If it is, I hope we never wake up, he murmured against her hair. Though I have plans for our future that are very much rooted in reality. Oh. What kind of plans? Finn looked out over the town, his expression thoughtful. I've been offered a job. Sheriff Donovan is retiring next year and he's recommended me as his replacement. Nora pulled back in surprise. Sheriff Xavier? That has a certain ring to it. I thought so too, Finn agreed with a smile. It would mean staying in Red Rock Falls, putting down those roots we talked about, building a home, maybe starting a family someday. He looked at her questioningly. If that's what you want. Nora felt a surge of emotion at the thought of children with Finn's kind eyes and her stubborn determination. It's everything I want, she assured him. Then it's settled, Finn said, sealing the decision with a kiss that promised much more to come later when they were alone. The following day, they set out for a brief honeymoon at a hot springs resort in the mountains. As their carriage rumbled along the dusty road leading out of town, Nora looked back at Red Rock Falls, the place that had almost been her end, but had instead become her beginning. Something on your mind? Finn asked, noticing her contemplative expression. I was just thinking about that day at the hanging tree, she said softly. When I begged them to end it quick and you said, no, madam, we start living now, Finn finished for her. I meant it then, and I mean it now. We've got a whole life ahead of us, Nora Xavier, and I intend to make the most of every day of it. Nora leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing over her. As do I, my love, as do I. 2 years later, Sheriff Finn Xavier stood on the porch of the house he'd built with his own hands on a piece of land just outside Red Rock Falls. The spring evening was mild, the desert blooming with wildflowers after recent rains. Inside, he could hear Nora singing softly to their 3-month-old daughter, Emma. Life had settled into a rhythm that sometimes still surprised him with its peaceful simplicity. The town had grown, the railroad finally reaching them the previous winter. New faces arrived daily, bringing change and opportunity. The school where Nora had once taught now had 3 teachers, though she'd stepped away temporarily to care for their daughter. "Is she asleep?" Finn asked as Nora joined him on the porch, their daughter cradled against her shoulder. "Almost," Nora replied, swaying gently in the age-old rhythm of mothers everywhere. "She's fighting it as usual, stubborn like her father." "And determined like her mother," Finn added with a smile, wrapping an arm around them both. They stood together, watching the sunset paint the desert in hues of gold and crimson. In the distance, a coyote called, the sound echoing across the open land. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" Nora asked softly, careful not to disturb their now sleeping daughter. "If you hadn't come along when you did that day," Finn tightened his arm around her. "I try not to dwell on it, but I thank God every day that I was there." "As do I." Nora looked up at him, love shining in her eyes. "You saved more than my life that day, Finn. You saved my faith in humanity, my hope for the future. You've given me just as much in return," he assured her. "A home, a family, a purpose beyond just drifting from place to place." Emma stirred against Nora's shoulder, making the tiny mewling sounds that never failed to tug at Finn's heart. He stroked his daughter's downy head with a gentle finger. "She'll grow up knowing her father is a hero," Nora said, watching the tender interaction. Finn shook his head. "Not a hero, just a man trying to do what's right." "A hero in my eyes," Nora insisted, "and that's what matters." They fell silent, content in each other's company as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The life they'd built together wasn't perfect. There were still those in town who remembered Nora's ordeal and judged her for it, still dangers inherent in Finn's position as sheriff. But it was a good life, rich with love and purpose. As if reading his thoughts, Nora said, "I wouldn't change a thing, not even the difficult parts. They led us here to this moment." Finn pressed a kiss to her temple. "Nor would I. Every step of the journey was worth it, to end up here with you and Emma." They remained on the porch until full darkness fell, then went inside to put their daughter to bed properly. Later, as they lay together in the quiet of their room, Finn drew Nora close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I love you, Mrs. Xavier," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "And I love you, Sheriff Xavier," she replied, nestling against him, "today and always." As sleep claimed them, Finn's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. For the woman in his arms, for their daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, and for the twist of fate that had brought him to that hanging tree just in time to say the words that had changed both their lives forever. "No, madam. We start living now," and they had. Through challenges and triumphs, through small everyday joys and occasional sorrows, they had built a life together that neither could have imagined in those desperate moments of their first meeting. A life not just of survival, but of thriving. A life rich with love, purpose, and the promise of many more years to come. In the end, it wasn't just Nora who had been saved that day beneath the hanging tree. In saving her, Finn had saved himself as well from a life of rootless wandering, from the consuming quest for vengeance that had driven him for so long. Together, they had found healing, redemption, and a future brighter than either had dared to hope for. And as the years passed, their love only deepened, weathering every storm that came their way with the same courage and determination that had brought them together in the first place. Their family grew, the town prospered, and the hanging tree eventually fell during a summer storm, making way for new growth, a fitting metaphor for the second chance they had been given. Throughout it all, they never forgot the moment that had started it all. A desperate plea for mercy, answered not with a quick end, but with the beginning of a lifetime together. "We start living now." Words spoken in defiance of death that had become their enduring promise to each other to live each day fully. to face whatever challenges came their way together, and to never take for granted the precious gift of time they had been granted. And live they did, writing their own story day by day, page by page, creating a legacy of love and courage that would inspire generations to come.